A vast, dark mass of whales suddenly surged toward the shore, as if collectively embracing death. Despite people's desperate efforts to save them, nothing could stop their determination to die. There were no predators chasing them, no sudden environmental disaster, so why did they rush toward the coast in such a resolute manner, ending their own lives? Just a few hours before the tragedy, hundreds of meters offshore, the whales had already lost their usual calm. They huddled tightly together, circling and wandering repeatedly, letting out cries that echoed across the sea and sky. There was no trace of vitality in those sounds. It was as if they were saying farewell to the ocean they depended on, or perhaps sending an incomprehensible cry for help to the confused and helpless humans. At first, those who discovered them thought it was merely a rare natural spectacle. No one realized that this repeated circling was their final struggle before heading toward destruction. Within just a few hours, it was as if they had made a final decision. One after another, they rushed toward the shallow waters. Their massive bodies collapsed and convulsed upon the shoals. By the time rescuers hurried to the scene, dozens of pilot whales had already lost all signs of life. Their enormous bodies lay scattered across the beach, stretching along the coastline like a silent ocean of tombstones. Hundreds of volunteers, with no time to grieve, immediately joined hands and stepped into the freezing seawater. With their fragile human bodies, they formed a barrier, desperately trying to block the whales still heading toward the shore. Yet in the whales' eyes, there was no hesitation, only an almost obsessive determination, as if death was their only destination. Under the scorching sun, the whales gradually weakened. Their skin began to crack, their breathing grew fainter, and every gasp seemed like a final struggle against life itself. Rescuers raced against time. Volunteers brought bedsheets from their homes, soaked them in water, and carefully covered the whales, repeatedly pouring water over their bodies in an attempt to preserve even the slightest chance of survival. Meanwhile, rescue teams worked together to push the stranded whales back toward deeper waters. Everyone prayed sincerely, praying for the tide to rise quickly, praying that these lives could be accepted once again by the sea. As time passed, more and more pilot whales stopped breathing. Fortunately, by evening, the tide began to rise. Just when people thought there was hope, the whales that had been carefully guided back into the deep sea suddenly turned around again and, ignoring all attempts to stop them, charged back toward the shore. Despite everyone's best efforts, all attempts seemed powerless in the face of such unwavering determination. The next morning, the sea breeze carried both sorrow and tension across every exhausted and solemn face. Yet no one gave up. Still, the whales repeatedly rushed back to the shallow waters. The rescue operation lasted for 3 days. In the end, the speed of human rescue efforts could not overcome the whales' will to die. Prolonged stranding severely worsened their physical condition. Even those that were eventually returned to the ocean had almost no chance of survival. Finally, among endless grief and helplessness, people made a heartbreaking decision. To spare the whales from prolonged suffering, the rescue team had no choice but to end their lives. When the last mournful cry faded into the sea breeze, this world-shocking tragedy finally came to an end. Out of more than 200 pilot whales, 196 remained forever on that shore, becoming an eternal regret. Only a small group, under the desperate protection of humans, managed to return to the deep sea, carrying on the memory of their pod. Humans often believe they can control everything, that they can save every life in danger. But in the face of this tragedy, we are so small and powerless. The resolute figures of those pilot whales, their cries that shook the sea and sky, and the rescue efforts that ultimately failed, all have become a pain etched deep in our hearts. It serves as a constant reminder. Only by protecting and caring for nature can we create a more harmonious home.